Shalom, shalom, peace, peace. Thank you guys for joining us. This is Jadiel from the Fourth Angels Learning Center. And today we're going to have a closer look session. Our closer look study today is on Christ, the end of the law. Messiah, the end of the law. So, let me give you a little backdrop because this is going to be pretty, I would say we're going to look through this chapter, Romans chapter 10. And we're going to see that this doesn't mean that the law is ended by the Messiah's death. Many dispensationalists, and not only dispensationalists, most people that believe that the law is done away with are is referred to as dispensationalists. I already explained this in one of the other videos, but I think I should do this in case you didn't look at the other video, Grace and Truth, and the other one, Author of Salvation. So, dispensationalist is a person that believes that at one point Yah required a certain standard of living, which is by the law that Moses gave from Mount Sinai. And after the Messiah died, after the Messiah died and rose from the dead, that now there was a new requirement of life, and it did not involve the law of Moses. It involved grace and truth, or it involves something else now. The Spirit. Because there's this idea that the Spirit didn't exist. But the Spirit wasn't poured out at that time. It was only poured out from the book of Acts. So, with that being said, we're going to analyze to see if this scripture supports that idea. And if it does not support that idea, please stop using this verse to try to support that false idea. So before we start, I want to make sure everybody remembers to subscribe, to click the bell for notifications, as well as to like. You can support the ministry by sharing the content. That's how we would like your support. And you can also support us financially if you would like to. Go to 4alc.com and you can support us there financially as well. Please send us your comments, your emails, comment on this video, just engage with us. We're engaging with a lot of different people outside of YouTube. So what we're trying to do is trying to kind of bombard YouTube with the content that we feel will kind of counter many false ideas that's causing people to go in a totally different direction. So we're just trying to bring everything back to a correct perspective and repair the breach. So with that being said, let's get right into it. Romans chapter 10, the problem verse that we're going to be focusing on or taking a closer look at is Romans 10 verse 4, which says, "For the Messiah, for Christ, is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone that believes." Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone that believes. Now this whole chapter is interesting because if you read this whole chapter in its context, there's no way that we could come to the conclusion that the law has ended, but that the law has a purpose or a conclusion. That word law, the word end, let's look at that first, because I want to make sure that we understand. We're looking at Old English. We're looking at the way that people in the 1600s used certain English words that is not used that way anymore. We're looking at Greek words with different meanings, sometimes from the English translation. So let's look at that. That word end, which is right, is used correctly, but it means conclusion. It means conclusion, not removal. Something is not being removed. Something is being concluded. The law is concluded by the Messiah, meaning that Messiah is what the law is pointing you to. The the place that the law is trying to get you to, or the end point of the law, is the Messiah. That's the same as all the scripture. Scripture is trying to get you with the Messiah. The gospel is trying to get you the conclusion or the end of the gospel, or the Messiah is the end of the gospel as well. It is what it is what everything is pointing us to. So listen to the verse. For Messiah is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone that believes. The end of the law for righteousness. So how this is interpreted is that righteousness is no longer done by the law. So Yah required righteousness to come by the law at one point, and now Messiah ended that, and now righteousness comes by those who believe. So, okay, we can go to Abraham. Now, let's analyze this idea. Is righteousness by the law? Was righteousness ever by the law? Absolutely not. How did Abraham obtain righteousness? Let's go to Genesis. I think this is what, and it turns into as a constant evolution of these teachings. Once they twist a certain idea, it just continues to evolve and eliminate more and more verses. So looking at this, right? Genesis chapter 15. What did it say? It says here in verse 5 and 6, it says, and he brought him forth abroad and said, look now toward the heaven, tell the stars, if you are able to number them. And he said unto him, so shall your seed be. And he believed Yahuwah, and he counted it to him for righteousness. He believed Yah, and he counted it for him for righteousness. Let's see a confirmation of this. We're going to look at two confirmations of this, because remember, none of this is supposed to happen until Messiah came, because he was the end of the law for righteousness. There is some people who teach, I don't know what to call it, a loop-de-loop dispensation, meaning that Abraham had the covenant, right, by faith, and then we went into a law-based covenant, and then we went back. Messiah took the law-based covenant and reestablished the Abrahamic covenant. You see, we're going to keep doing this gymnastics, going to Abraham, Moses. No, it's the same. It's the same. Just because Yah had to add more elements in order to teach a more degraded generation doesn't mean that it's a whole brand new idea, and then he has to remove that idea to bring us back to the Abraham covenant. No, here's why. So it says that he believed, and it was counted him from righteousness. And what happened after that? What was his testimony after he received this righteousness? Let's go to Genesis chapter 26, and let's look at verse 4 and 5. Elohim is promising to Isaac the same promises he gave to his father Abraham. And look what he says about his father Abraham. Verse 3 says, sojourn in this land, Isaac, I will be with you, and I will bless you, for unto you and your seed I will give these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swore to Abraham your father. And I will make your seed multiply as the stars of heaven, and give unto you your seed all these countries, and in your seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. Because Abraham obeyed my voice, kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. If we can notice, he doesn't mention to Abraham believed, and it was given to him for righteousness. When he believed and received righteousness in himself, he was then empowered and enabled to obey Yah's voice, keep his charge, keep his commandments, keep his statutes and his laws. All of those things were done by faith. All of those things were done by faith. So when we get to Mount Sinai, he gives them commandments, statutes, laws, charges. He tells Moses to obey his voice in Exodus chapter 23, verse 20 to 22. He tells him that someone is going to be there, obey his voice, right? Keep his commandments, his charge, his statutes, his laws, by faith. He told them at Mount Sinai to believe. That's what he was giving at Mount Sinai, as well as with Abraham. So the idea that Abraham only believed and received righteousness, and now we have to flip over Sinai in order to get to the cross, is silly. Everything was consistent. Messiah was restoring the covenant, which we're going to talk about in another study. But we see clearly Abraham received righteousness and kept his commandments and laws and statutes. So there's no separation of Abraham and laws, statutes, and commandments. It doesn't matter whether it was the written covenant of Yah or whether it is come out of Ur. Come out of Ur and go to the land, and if he obeys, it doesn't matter what command it was, you cannot obey Yah's command without that unction, without that enablement by Yah. So, with that being said, looking at Romans chapter 10, how is it the end of the law? How is Messiah the end of the law for righteousness for those who believe? The conclusion of the law for righteousness for them that believe. Those who believe, when they see the law, they will see and believe in Messiah, and they will receive righteousness. That's what it's saying. The law points them to Messiah so they can believe and receive righteousness. This is how Abraham believed and received righteousness. This is how Moses believed and received righteousness. The law is a description of righteousness. It can't give you righteousness. But let's look at a few verses real quick. I think I spoke too long. Let's look at a few verses to see if there's any confirmations in the New Testament about it. We're in Romans 10, so let's go to Romans 4. Romans 4 verse 3, it says, what does the scripture say? Abraham believed Elohim, and it was counted for him for righteousness. Now to him that works is the reward not reckoned of grace, but of debt. But to him that works, that does not work, but believes on him that justifies the ungodly, his faith is counted for righteousness. Absolutely. This is the initial conversation. What did you say, Yah? I believe it, and I believe you. And I received something that allowed righteousness to come inside of me. It is only the Ruach. It is only the set-apart spirit that was bringing righteousness into Abraham. Those who believe, they receive the gift of the Ruach. You cannot receive righteousness without receiving the Spirit. Something has to bestow righteousness inside of a sinner. That's just how it has to be. There's no way in Scripture that someone can obtain righteousness without obtaining the Spirit of Yah. Let's continue to look at this, right? Let's continue to look at this. So we look at this, right? Romans 4. I'm going to have to do a study on Romans 4 because many people misunderstand Romans 4 also. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to James chapter 2. And I'm going to explain what James is talking about, because James and Paul are not at odds with this understanding. Faith without works. Is he talking about just actions, just regular actions? No. Watch this. Verse 14 of James chapter 2. It says, "What does it profit, my brethren, though a man say he has faith and does not show it by his works? Can faith save him? If a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you say to him, go in peace and be warm and filled, notwithstanding that you don't give him the things that he needs for his body, what is it going to profit him? Even so, faith, if it does not have works, is dead because it's by itself. If a man say, you have faith and I have works, show me your faith without your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. You believe that there is one Elohim, you do well. The devils also believe and tremble. But will you know, O vain man? Called him a vain man. Without faith, faith without works is dead. Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he had offered Isaac upon his son upon the altar? See thou how faith worked with works, or produced works, and by works faith was made perfect or complete, or a complete package. Faith demonstration. He believed and he was righteous. He did righteous things. The scripture is fulfilled and said, Abraham believed Elohim, and it was imputed unto him for righteousness, and he was called a friend of Elohim. You see then how that by his work, by the works of man, is justified, and not by faith only. Likewise, was not Rahab the harlot justified by works, when she was received the messengers and had sent them out another way? For as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead. So he believed. If he did not believe, he would have not received righteousness. But because he believed in his heart, in his mind, he received righteousness by the Spirit, and he was able to perform, walk it out. He was able to exercise what he believed. If Yah told him to leave and he did not leave that wouldn't be a demonstration of faith. He wouldn't have revealed or manifested that he truly believed. So when we're looking at James express this is the expression that Paul has as well. The righteousness was given. Abraham exercised that righteousness. He exercised that righteousness. And Messiah teaches the same thing. So let's go to Romans chapter 10. Let's go to Romans chapter 10 real quick. So let's continue to read to see if they're saying that the law of Moses is ended by the Messiah's death. Let's start at verse 4. For Messiah is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone that believes. He's the conclusion of the law to receive righteousness for everyone that believes. For Moses described the righteousness which is by the law. Moses described the righteousness which is by the law, that the man which does those things shall live by them. But the righteousness which is of faith speaks like this. Don't say in your heart, who shall ascend into heaven? That is to bring Messiah down from above. Or who shall descend into the deep? That is to bring up Messiah from the dead. But what does it say? The word is near you, even in your mouth. You believe that it's in your mouth. You believe that it's in your heart. That is the word of faith which we preach. And I want to pause there for a second. So this expression, the righteousness, verse 6, the righteousness which is by faith speaks this way. Don't say in your heart, who shall ascend into heaven, or who shall descend into the deep? But what does it say? The word is near you and is in your mouth and is in your heart. This is the word of faith which we preach. Paul is saying that we preach what is expressed here. Now, where did this phrase that he just expressed, where did it come from? Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 30. Deuteronomy. Moses wrote Deuteronomy. Let's look at verse 11. Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 11. Remember, he says that the righteousness which is by faith speaks this way. Verse 11 says, this is the commandment which I command you this day. It is not difficult for you, neither far off. It is not in heaven that you should say, who shall go up to the heaven to bring it to us, that we may hear it and do it. Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who shall go over the sea for us to bring it to us, that we may hear it and do it. But the word is very near unto you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it. I have set before you this day life and good, death and destruction. In that I command you this day to love Yah, your Elohim, to walk in his ways, to keep his commandments and his statutes and his judgments, that you may live and multiply, and Yah, your Elohim, shall bless you in the land where you go to possess it. What? This is the word of faith that Paul says he preaches? How? This is the law of Moses. The law of Moses seems to be the righteousness which is by faith. The law seems to express faith. Let's continue to look at that. Let's go to Galatians chapter 3. What does Galatians chapter 3 says? I know many people are already there in their mind. Already there in their mind. And I'm going to say what this does not mean as well, because there's a line in there that is just horrible. Galatians chapter 3, looking at verse 24. It says, wherefore the law was our schoolmaster to bring us to Messiah. This is what we said. The Messiah is the end of the law for righteousness, to give righteousness to those who believe. It's the conclusion. It's the result. The result of the law is the Messiah. So it says here, wherefore the law was our schoolmaster to bring us to Messiah, that we might be justified by faith. The law teaches us faith. But after the faith has come, we are no longer under a schoolmaster. Here's the problem. People say that this word, after that faith has come, people tend to mindlessly imply Messiah. So they say when Messiah came, right? They say when faith comes means when Messiah came, we're no longer under the law. No. Get that out of here. It says specifically, when faith comes, when a person receives faith from the law, from understanding what the law is showing them, then they are no longer under the law, meaning that they are no longer condemned by the law. They no longer have a witness that of the law that they are sinners. And it says, for you are all the children of Elohim by faith in Yahushua Messiah. For as many of you as were immersed into Messiah have put on Messiah. There's neither Jew nor Greek nor bond nor free. There is neither male nor female, for all are one in Yahushua Messiah. And if you belong to Messiah, then you are Abraham's descendants and heirs according to his promise. So to the idea that the law brings a person to Messiah, how in the world are we going to do away with the law when there's so many people that still needs to be brought to Messiah? So this teaches not that the law is done away with, but that the law has a specific purpose, to bring us to faith. The end of the law, the conclusion of the law. That word end means telos, right? It means telos in the Greek. Let's see how that word is used. Let's look at 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 9. It's going to tell us how that word is used. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 9, it says, receiving the end of your faith, even the salvation of your souls. The end of your faith? Is your faith ending because you receive salvation? Absolutely not. But this is the conclusion of what you believe in. This is what your faith is bringing you to. It doesn't mean it's ending. Let's look at another verse. 2 Corinthians, and it uses this in different ways. So I'm just going to point out this idea real quick. So 2 Corinthians chapter 3, looking at verse 13, and it says, and not as Moses, which put a veil over his face, that the children of Israel could not steadfastly look at the end of that which is abolished. So they could not see the result of what was destroyed. They could not see that the bonds of wickedness was destroyed. They could not recognize that. They covered it, so they remained in the bondage of their sins. Anyway, back to Romans chapter 10. Back to Romans chapter 10. We clearly see that the law is not something that is The law is not something that is harmful. The law is not something that is affecting them negatively. The law is bringing them to the understanding of Yah. If you do not understand the law, then you cannot understand what it's bringing you to. If you do away with the law, it no longer brings people to Messiah. This is what we have in the New Testament, Galatians Chapter 3, telling us what the law was supposed to do. This is what Romans 10, Paul is saying, this is what we preach, and he quotes from Deuteronomy chapter 30. He quotes from Deuteronomy 30 and mentions the commandments. So if we are nailing this to the cross, when the New Testament itself is saying that's what we preach, and the New Testament, Hebrews chapter 4, verse 2 says they received the gospel. When did they receive the gospel in the wilderness? At Mount Sinai. Because that's what Paul preached. He preached Deuteronomy 30. So we have to understand that the Christ is not ending the law, but he is the result of those who see the law. He is the result that if they see Messiah in the law, then they receive righteousness if they believe, not the law being removed. That is not what Scripture is saying. So I hope that this was clear. I hope that this was broken down clearly. I don't want any misunderstandings, because this is very important for our walk. If we are missing major components of how we ought to live, how we ought to walk, and if we're missing a understanding of what we ought to do, what we ought to believe, how we ought to look at Scripture and understand, then please contact me. Check out the other videos. Send me your emails. Send me your topics, the things that you want to get more in depth with. Let us know here. We definitely will make videos. I'll put together whatever suggestions is brought in. I'll put together some studies basically revealing what Scripture says about those things. And I hope that this was edifying. I hope that this was clear. I hope that we are able to ask Yah to open up our eyes, so that way when we look at the law, we see Messiah, that we will be able to see that Messiah at the result of what the law is revealing, that we could receive that righteousness by faith in what his word says. So I hope that this was clear. Again, subscribe, share the content, support the ministry, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next study. Shalom, guys.